my crafty friends, it's Beverleigh here over at Crafting Chaos with lesson 5 in our easier or for newer users of Canvas Workspace tutorials. And I'm going to show you this time how to locate a free file that you can use in your projects, and I've turned it into a stencil that I could use to make backgrounds for a card or project. And what we're going to be making today is a feather stencil like this, where you've got four different size feathers on the same stencil. Now I suggest you cut stencil using mylar, which is a thin stencil plastic, thin enough for it to not interfere with any of the techniques you would like to do, and definitely more than your scan and cut's more than capable of cutting it. So let's get started. Now today I'm opting to try to use the online version of the scan and cut workspace, just because I fancied a change, and because for some reason sometimes I think when my computer is busy processing other things, it drags its feet a little bit and it's not as responsive, so I thought it might be quicker to do it this way. Right, so what we're going to need first of all is a feather image. Now one of the places where I go for images is Free Stencil Gallery. I also use something called Open Clip Art, and I also use Pixabay when I find it. Not that one, this one. And I found the one that I was going to use, so I looked in all three of those places, and the image the reason I'm telling you about the other ones is if you wanted to look for a different image, then you could do so. So what I've done is located a feather. Now the beauty of having it come from Pixabay, when we look at the downloads, and you can download images, if you set yourself up an account and it's free, you can download the images, and they're free to use, and you can download them in various sizing images, but you can also download as a vector graphic that can be pulled straight into your scan and cut machine. So I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to click on download, and that will put that straight into my download folder because I'm working on a Mac. Then I can head back over to Canvas Workspace, and because we saved it as an SVG, I can choose the file, go to my downloads, and it should be the last one that went in there, and bring it in and say OK. So this should bring the feather file straight into Scan and Cut Canvas, and I'm just going to flood that with colour so you can see what we've got. So it's actually quite a large image. So what I'm going to do is shrink it down till it's roughly the size of the one that we have here, because I thought that was a nice size, so we'll go with it at that. And then all I did was hit D on my keyboard to make a duplicate, and I reduced the size a little. I'm just checking it off about against them, so roughly. And then I'm going to select it again, I'm going to duplicate it again, and I'm going to resize it down again. I'm just checking it with my original, so it needs to be a little bit smaller. And it's not exactly, the exact size does not really matter at all. And then finally, for one more time, hit D on my keyboard and just shrink it down a little bit. Okay, so that's where we're up to. And I'm going to select them all, edit, and I'm just going to group them for now. So there are my 4 feathers ready to create my stencil. Now I'm going to make this stencil out of a basic shape, and I'm going to be using a square. Now if you imagine an A4 sheet of paper, it would be around about 11.5 inches long, and it would be about 8 inches wide, thereabouts. So I'm just going to take that off and type in 8 inches, and that would be roughly the dimensions of a A4 piece of paper. So I want to be able to cut 4 stencils out of an A4 sheet. So I'm thinking if I sort of worked out half of that distance, which is 4, and half of this one, which should roughly be 5.5, then we're okay. So I'm going to make it 5.5 by 4 and say up and say OK. So now I've got a square that is going to be roughly the size of 1/4 of a piece of, oops, I'm just going to undo that and I'm going to rotate it by angle. I'm going to do it by 90 so that I've got the right orientation. But that should enable me to be able to, I'm just going to make that a little bit smaller so that it fits on that stencil like so. So I'm trying to get the most out of my stencil mylar material. So what we need to do is make sure that that square that we've just pulled on is at the back. And if I pull some colour into it now, you'll see it's actually on top. Now that's not what we want. So what we do, we click on it so we've got this blue dotted box all the way around. And once we've got that, we right click and we say send to back, and that will send it to back, and then your feathers are on top. And I'm just going to select everything so now I can see the blue line going around the feathers and the blue lines going around the actual rectangle as is now. So I've just zoomed in a little bit, and I did that by clicking on the zoom button and then on where I wanted it to zoom. But I must remember to click this next, because if I leave it on zoom and click anywhere again, it's just going to zoom in even more. So I'm going to view, fit back to matte, and if that's all that happens, just repeat the procedure till you've got it big enough for you to see. So I've got them both selected, and then I'm going to edit, align them vertically and centrally to each other. Then I'm going to select both and I'm edit, process the overlap and subtract, and that should effectively punch out the feathers from the pink, this pink mat, if you will. So there you've got your feathers. Now obviously they're going to be a little bit fragile in this area, so just be careful when you're actually using them. What you could do if you wanted to just sturdy up the smaller ones is add a couple of anchor points, and I'll show you how to do that. I'll just zoom back out, so view, fit to matte, and all I've done, I'll just delete that, is brought on a basic shape, and it could have been, I'll bring on this one for argument's sake, and I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to bring this, not quite so much, I've done what I said you shouldn't do, just view, fit to matte. If that happens, then you will want to zoom in on this part, big ways down like so, and then we're going to select and drag that shape down so we can see what we're doing. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to shrink this right down and make it narrower and very small like so, because what I'm effectively wanting to do is get it to reach from the central part of this feather, if you will. I'm going to get right in there, and actually because these lines are touching, we're going to not have any mylar left there, so I'm just going to view, fit to matte, and I'm just going to edit and undo, because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to adjust the size of the feathers a little bit so that we've not got, so we're back to that, and we can ungroup them, and I'll make more of the space by doing it this way. So I'm going to, first of all, rotate that one by about 90 degrees. Say OK. So now that's rotated that, and I'm just going to turn it on its side. Now that one could be made slightly bigger, which would then allow for these to be made slightly bigger. And again, I'm just going to rotate them, and all I'm doing is making sure that they're using the best parts of the mat, and that we are going to get a decent thing. So it might be that we could always adjust the size of these by making them a little bit wider first, and then we could make it a little bit bigger. So if we make it bigger, I'm just going to rotate it by about 45 degrees so it's in a more easier position, and then we can, I'm going to stretch it out so that it's a little bit wider like so, and I'm going to go on here now and delete that small one, and then once I've made it wider, so now that's made that bit in the centre a little bit wider, and it also gives us an alternative shape to our feather. So I'm liking that, and I'm going to duplicate it, and then I'm going to just shrink it one last time, but I might make it a little bit wider still. So we've got a selection of feathers, which is what I was aiming for, and I'm just going to flip that vertically so that maybe it fits better on my mat. So I'm just going to move that way and this way, and there we have now 4 feathers. Now if we zoom into that, we can have a see what we've got. We can now see that we are getting a better, I'm just going to click on that one, just extend it this way a little bit just to make that gap just a little bit wider there, so that we're going to get a decent amount of light showing there, if you will. Just going to make this a little bit wider as well. Okay, so now we've got, so if I view fit to mat, so all you've done is just adjusted the feathers. I'm going to select everything, process the overlap and subtract, and that should effectively punch those feathers out. And it just takes its time a little bit. Now when we zoom into sort of 100%, which are roughly what you'd actually be cutting, that's a much better scale now, and we can see that we've got this defined area up the middle. And if you was to put something underneath that was a different colour, so if we just make that say orange, say you wanted to, why you'd be doing an orange feather, I have no idea, but just to give you the impression what it would look like. So effectively, when you start to ink through, that's what you're going to see on your page. Okay, so that's how to create a very simple stencil. A view fit to mat, so that could be used in your projects. So I will save both and include both in the file if for those that want to use them. So I will save this to my blog. This is lesson 5, creating a stencil, but remember we did it using an image from Pixabay, which was free to download as a vector graphic, so there wasn't any finicky tracing to do. We just adjusted the feather that we pulled in, we made it wider and longer and so on. So now we've got a nice selection of feathers that we could lay onto our background piece of paper and ink through. So that's it for this lesson. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please like, share and subscribe. The last thing we'll need to do is give it a title, so I'm going to call it Feathers Stencil, and we are going to save it to our workspace, and that's effectively saving it to the cloud rather than to my MacBook. Okay. If you wanted to send it straight across to your scan and cut, you click the download button and it'll come up with the options. Some of them are going to be removed, that's fine, and we'll say if you want it to go to the scan and cut, that's fine, or you can download to your PC and put it on a memory stick if you're doing it that way. So I'm not going to do that at this stage, and I'm just going to double check that I've got my stencil saved, and it doesn't seem to have saved, so I'm just going to do it again. Make sure that we've got that feather stencil saved and say OK. And if we go to a new page, when we go in projects now, it should be saved in our projects. And there it is. So I can bring it back onto my mat. Okay. Now then, in the next video, the next in this series, I'm going to show you how to create the dovecoat stamping file, if you will. I'll just zoom in to show it you, because I thought this would be a nice sort of image that you could get your scan and cut to draw, and you could possibly get it to cut it out. I'll be working on that one. So you could certainly get it to draw and then scan it back in and get it to cut round the edges. And then you could use it alongside with your feathers to make a nice card. And I just thought that the two together went kind of nicely together. So I'm just going to view fit to mat because I've zoomed right in because I had that selected. So I'm thinking if you've got sort of your feathers as a nice background, you could then mount this on some card and add that coloured in as a digital stamp. So we're going to be doing the Dovecote for lesson 6, how to create, and if we look, it's a drawing line, and that's what we will get. Okay, when we view it as a drawing line and zoom in, because obviously it's going to be bigger than that, to 100%, which is roughly what you'll see it at. That's the image that we'll draw, and then you can obviously colour that in for yourself. So I'm just going to take the view off again, and so that I've done it to show that it's been, my intention would be to draw it using brown ink, possibly. So I'm just going to view everything fit to matte, and that's where we're up to. So I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. If you have, please remember to like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.